Some documents from the declassified CIA spy program known as the Stargate Project reveal that its agents, called remote viewers, occasionally encountered very unusual targets. On at least one occasion, a UFO or UAP event was officially requested as the main target for remote viewing. September 1989. While working on the still classified project, the CIA requested 17 remote viewing sessions to find out and explain an important event they were interested in. 3 of these sessions describe an accidental encounter with the UAP phenomenon. Remote viewer 032 described it first as a swirling metallic energy mass rotating in a counterclockwise direction. In one of the sessions, this object was perceived as a deadly weapon. During the further sessions, an agent of the Stargate Project labeled the object as an information-gathering UFO. Project Stargate was a secret U.S. Army unit funded by the Congress and created to investigate whether psychic phenomena had any military use. Stargate mainly focused on remote viewing.
The general description of remote viewing is the capacity to describe a person, place, or location in great detail to which you have no access to generally other than through mental means, and that it can't be shielded, it can't be blocked, and that means by distance, time. In other words, there's no way you can prevent a remote viewer from gaining access to it. We now know, after many, many years, almost 3 decades of deliberately trying to shield remote viewers, that you can't shield a remote viewer from anything. There are a lot of people out there that will tell you you can be shielded, you can prevent a remote viewer from getting to things, but you can't. I'm here to tell you can't. We've tried everything. Remote viewers have been put in submarines and taken down 1.5 miles into the ocean depths. They still do just as well. They've been put in positively shielded cages, negatively shielded cages. They do just as well.
For example, early on in the CIA remote viewing program that I set up at SRI, I was asked to check out claims of a psychic. And so I took this claimed psychic, invite him out to SRI to see what he could do. We had the quark detector, and so it was basically a quantum chip inside of mu metal magnetic shielding, inside of steel dewar for electrical shielding, inside of superconducting shielding, the requirement being that nothing could affect this thing from the outside. So I want to see if you can affect it. He affected it unequivocally 100%. You had this slow oscillation. What he did was he stopped the oscillation. Now, what turned out to be even more, quote, magical was when we asked him, how'd you know what to do? And he said, well, all I did was look inside, and then he drew out how things were related inside. They'd never been published, and it turned out that they were accurate. And so it was when I wrote all that up and circulated around, that's when the CIA came knocking at my doorstep.
One of the declassified documents includes a summary of a session that began with a perception of dark, cold surroundings high above everything else. Swirling masses of clouds and light surrounded the surface of a planet, accompanied by a tremendous amount of unharnessed energy. Then something completely unexpected occurred. As the source tried to focus on the energy mass, he noted perception of something rising out of the surface was present. This object had a metallic surface area and gave the appearance of being deadly. It was rotating counterclockwise and was steadily rising. In 5 days, the follow-up session was held, and in summary, it was confirmed again that the target is a rotating object of some form of metal. The metal inherent to this object is energy absorbent. It fuels itself by absorbing surrounding energies and processing them for power. This object is unmanned. There is no life associated with it. Remote Viewer also added that this object is either in the orbit of Earth or is destined for the orbit of Earth. It was noted that the diameter of the object was a very large proportion relative to the height of man, but the most fascinating details were given in the last third session, which was held 2 days later. Source 032 reported that the target continues rotating, cannot always be seen, and frequents this planet, although it did not originate here. Session confirmed again that there was no life on it. That made the agent suppose that perhaps it was some type of reconnaissance UFO probe. Quote, "The purpose of this object is to gather information. It is like a sponge. It gathers information of every kind in a way that I cannot explain." Then the remote viewer was probably asked to get inside of the object. According to the sketch, the object had a hollow opening in the center. Source reported that he cannot breathe inside and had a feeling of suffocation and pressure. It is stated in the document that the object made several passes around the planet, absorbing the information. When it was done, it moved away slowly and did not return. The summary of the document ends with a very intriguing conclusion. Quote, "This thing comes from another place. It is here in place of someone else. Again, its purpose is to gather and report. Self-sufficient, simple, and very accurate. Programmed. No mind of its own." End of quote. In a follow-up memo to the chief scientist of the Defense Intelligence Agency, it was noted that the perception of a UFO was likely incorrect and resulted from a distraction that 032 couldn't overcome. The uncertainty among the Stargate analysts seemed to stem from the fact that this was an unusual target, incidental to the primary intelligence gathering task. However, it appears they were targeting facilities related to nuclear material. If so, it is well documented that UFOs frequently appeared near such sites. But whatever it was, it certainly wasn't the first UFO object that was investigated during the existence of the Stargate Project. Joe McMoneagle, the elite remote viewer recruited by the U.S. Army, told about another UAP phenomenon case during one of his public speeches. But this time, this was an official Pentagon request related directly to the UFO as the main remote viewing target. That's the Joe McMoneagle sketch of how it looked. According to Joe's statement, it's the only official UFO target that was ever done by Stargate Project. We were not able to find any documents related to this remote viewing session, and the following information is based on Joe McMoneagle's presentation. June 1980. He was requested to target a segment of overhead film. There were 3 frames in this film with a photography of a ground military base. The facility was taken somewhere in an Eastern Bloc country that the U.S. was in a Cold War with at that time. Joe's task was to describe it in great detail.
Something else was caught in that same film. And so on the one hand, they had something very definitive that I could describe to confirm whether or not I was on target. At the same time, they had accidentally caught something on film, which, if I described it, would also confirm something. See how remote viewing works? Nice, huh?
Joe mentioned that the photographs were of the highest quality, with depth of field, arc, and speed data that allowed for estimating other technical details. They were captured by a K-11 spy satellite. Although the exact design of this satellite is still classified, it is known to be similar to or even more advanced than the famous Hubble telescope. In other words, it's like Hubble's bigger brother, but focused on the Earth's surface instead of distant galaxies. It provides incredible resolution. So you can imagine the quality of the captured UFO images in the Pentagon's possession. These images are likely as clear as you would expect them to be. The main remote viewing session statements about the UFO object were the following. It was a hard metallic object with observation ports across the top as well as underside or undercarriage. The outer edges rotate at high speed, and the object is in the process of making a 90-degree turn. In the first frame, it was entering and it was rolling over. The second frame was almost a complete turn. On the third frame, it was leaving the same edge it entered from. Object is traveling at about 7,240 kilometers per hour at about 4.3 kilometers altitude. Energy and propulsion system is a form of electromagnetically controlled fluid plasma.
The descriptions that I gave of the actual ground target simultaneous with this were judged to be about 80% correct. So my sketches and drawings of the ground target were as valid as the remote viewing that I did of the UFO. 2 months after I did this, I actually got to go to the Pentagon and see the frames blown up. And when I saw them, I said, my exact words were, "So that's what a UFO looks like." Their exact words were, "No, that's a..."
At the Stargate Project, remote viewers were also given training targets from time to time. These targets come in a form of encrypted coordinates, so neither viewer nor monitor had any prior knowledge or control over what they are going to target. March 27, 1973, Clearwater, Missouri. A UFO sighting happened in a dam and reservoir area. It was an intriguing event with a lot of activity, leading someone to suggest it would be a great training target for remote viewers. Joe described that the remote viewing session started by mentally placing him on the dam, looking in that direction.
And my first perception was an object moving that way. A light. Big light, about the size of a small aircraft carrier. My second perception was a whole bunch of lights arriving and then imploding, not exploding, but imploding. 4 of them arrived on a mountaintop and then imploded. I was very specific about that. So I had a sense that they just kind of arrived together and imploded. Very strange. Next perception was another aircraft carrier went by from right to left. Big, bright, white aircraft carrier, size light. Third impression was the arrival of 2 big circular lights that came together in the form of a figure 8 and kind of wobbled there, doing a dance.
At that point, his monitor suggested that Joe should join the light. It sounded like a good idea, and as soon as he thought about it, Joe experienced what he described as an out-of-body experience.
At which point I had an out-of-body. It's just like being snapped right out of my body. Bang. And I found myself sitting in a white cube. Perfectly white cube. Opaque, very bright, with no windows or doors. Just the pure white cube. And no way to get out, and no way of knowing how I got in. So I started looking for a seam or a door or a window, and couldn't seem to find one.
Joe said that he tried to get back to his body, but he couldn't. He started getting nervous and at the same time very curious. He kept looking around, and at some point, things went even more bizarre.
So I thought, oh, time to go back to my body now. And nothing happened. Oops. Started getting nervous. And then these two light beings appear, or one light being appeared. It looked very humanoid in shape. It had no face, just the light outline. And it folded into two of itself. And my perception was it was arguing with itself. And that really made me feel uncomfortable. And it raised an appendage, and a light beam shot out of its appendage and hit me in the chest. And I felt a moment of panic. And then I said, I got angry. And I said, get out of here. I'm tired of this. And it argued some more and winked out. And I started hammering on the side of this box, this cube. And then stood there thinking, this is too bizarre. And then I had a sense that something reached inside my chest and started feeling around, messing around inside my chest. And you know when you strum a guitar string with your nail? Well, something found a nerve inside me and strummed it, and I was instantly, violently ill, like I was going to projectile vomit. That's when I sat bolt upright in my body and collided heads with my monitor.
The remote viewing session was terminated, as they did not understand what was going on. The total time of the session was 15 minutes. However, Joe noted that it felt like an hour.
And I haven't a clue what was going on at that particular remote viewing site. I do know that that was definitely multidimensional. It was not what I call a classic UFO event.
This event had a big impact on Joe for obvious reasons, and he returned to this UAP target in April 1988.
Squares within squares. That's the first result I got, which I find very interesting since I spent so much time in an opaque white cube. Squares within squares. I've also gotten telephone booths. I've been inside telephone booths, or telephone booth-like places, glass rooms inside glass rooms. I think probably it's a confounding place. It's a place designed to confound. It may even be a trick of the mind that they play, designed to muddle our senses. Trying to target a UFO, it may even be a screen. I said that remote viewers can't be blocked. You can't be. I didn't say you couldn't be deceived. One of the ways that you hide things from remote viewers is by hiding them within things that look similar. If you want to hide one of these from a remote viewer, what's the best place to hide it? In a pile of them. So one of these cubes is probably real. The rest aren't. One of the opaque cubes is probably real. The rest aren't. One of the aliens is probably real. The rest aren't. That's the best place to hide. You got to think of that.
It's intriguing to think about what could have caused such a trap for the remote viewer's out-of-body experience. As mentioned before, remote viewing can go through any obstacle and can't be blocked. However, in this case, it seemed like his body double got stuck in an inescapable artificial trap. This makes one wonder if there's a fundamental difference between the physics of remote viewing and out-of-body experiences.
In May of 1984 at the Monroe Institute, I had been training with Bob for almost 14 months, learning to control my out-of-body experiences. I had had spontaneous out-of-bodies for many years, and Bob had been training with me in his lab at the last year of my time at the project, Stargate Project, to teach me to control my out-of-bodies. I wanted to see if controlled out-of-bodies were better at producing information, collection information, than remote viewing. It turns out you can do very specific things with out-of-bodies that you can't do with remote viewing, but I don't think it's as good.
In Robert Monroe's first book, he recounts an experiment he conducted in the early 60s. He was inside a Faraday cage where he had performed numerous out-of-body experiments. A Faraday cage is a box made of wire mesh designed to block electromagnetic signals. Here is Monroe's experiment description. This was an experiment I don't want to try again. I was in the charged Faraday cage, copper screen mesh above ground, DC charge 50 kilovolts. I attempted to move through the cage. I got out of the physical okay, then I seemed to be entangled in a large bag made of flexible wire. The bag gave out when I pushed against it, but I couldn't go through it. I struggled like a trapped animal in a snare, and finally went back into the physical. In thinking it over, quite evidently it was not the wire itself, but the electrical field pattern set up in fundamentally the same shape as the cage, but more flexible. Maybe this could be the basis for a ghost catcher. Monroe's experience aligns with reports from other researchers' out-of-body experiences. Many avoid having these experiences during thunderstorms due to the electrical buildup in the atmosphere, which hampers their abilities and causes disorientation. They also avoid power lines, as some have reported feeling caught and stuck to them. Could something similar have happened to Joe when his body double got trapped inside the UAP phenomenon? It seems that both remote viewing and out-of-body experiences are capabilities present in the human body. The effectiveness of each method depends on the specific problem one is trying to solve.
If you want to know how the trigger mechanism works on a Chinese nuclear weapon, out-of-body's better because you can go to the Chinese nuclear weapon and put your face in it, look around, do detailed drawing. But if you want to know where all the parts from the weapon came from, remote viewing's better because all the parts are intricately linked together data-wise. So things are different for how you want to do things.
The value of phenomena of remote viewing is that it proves to be an effective tool for accessing information and gathering details on various targets not yet accessible by other means. Even though we don't fully understand the underlying mechanisms of remote viewing, it can still be used. The Stargate program was ended and declassified in 1995 due to the CIA's budget cuts and downsizing, even though remote viewing was a valid method for gathering intelligence and the program had scientific value.
There seems to be a rumor, I don't know how it got started, that because of the project in 19.5 years of remote viewing in the government, for every intelligence agency the government has, to include the Coast Guard, there seems to be a rumor that the government somehow supported remote viewing. That's wrong. The government never did. They used it, they loved it, they tasked it, and they beat a lot of people up over it. But every day that we remote viewed was like a knife fight in a phone booth. It cost a lot of lives, and a lot of people got hurt, and it destroyed a lot of careers.
Even years after the CIA Stargate Project ended, research on these unusual cognitive phenomena slowly continues by open science. But the most interesting question is, has this program survived under a different name within another three-letter agency's secret science project?
The Stargate program, which is a government sort of psychic spy program, ended in 1995. You know, a lot of people after that said that it wasn't all that effective.
See, that's part of the negative
the stigmatization. Well, I was just reading Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, you know, where it talks about ATIP and I guess
OSAP, yeah.
OSAP, these two programs. And it looks like remote viewing is sort of, again, revived.
I don't think it ever really died.